Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome to another card video. This week I'm going to show you how to use Stampin' markers to do blending similar to Copic markers. I'm going to start by using my scoreboard to create a background. I'm doing every inch here, and then I'm going to turn it sideways, and I'm going to do every half an inch, just making score lines with the stylus that comes with this new Stampin' Up! Scoreboard. I'm going to be using Perfect Plum and my Ranger applicator. I'm going to apply the ink starting off the cardstock and then just rolling my applicator onto the cardstock in tiny circles. I sped this up quite a bit because it does take some time to get good coverage. And you'll see that the scoring marks come out darker. Makes it a little interesting background. Now I'm going to just flick a bunch of water on here because I really wanted a good watery effect. This is something that I used my Sizzix to cut out. It's the top note die made by Stampin' Up! It's got some stitching around the edge, which is really cool. So I'm using Daffodil Light ink and using that same method to apply the ink to the edges, really only. I'm not really doing the center. And then I got out my Distress ink in brushed corduroy. It's kind of a brownish color, and I'm just going to do the edges so that I can ink up that stitch line. I have one flower from the Fifth Avenue floral set and the other flower and the leaf from the Fabulous Floret set. And I'm going to use my Memento Tuxedo black ink on watercolor paper, and that's the key here, is that you have to use the watercolor paper to get the blending. I ended up actually only using 3 leaves, but I didn't know how many I was going to need, so I just did 5. So this is the sheet from my Stampin' but you can use pretty much any plastic sheet or a stamp set cover or anything. And as you can see, my blender pen doesn't have any ink on it, so I'm going to dip it into this Riding Hood red that I put on my sheet using the marker. And I'm going to pick up color and put it onto the paper. And the blender pen has a moistured sort of tip to it, so it's got some water in it. And whenever I start on my cardstock, I'm going to start in the center of the flower, because that's where the darkest area is going to be, where the shadow is. And I'm going to work outward. So this is what it would normally look like when you're using a blender pen. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my marker and I'm going to color in on the inside, the darkest part of the flower, where the shadow is. I have this sped up just a little bit, so it's almost in real time. And then I use my blender pen and I just start blending it outward. Now if I get see I had too much marker on there, so I just wiped it off on the side because I'm going to be cutting these flowers out. So that's the one thing you have to be careful of, is once you put the color on, you can't really get it off. That's a big difference between these markers and the Copic markers. So that's one petal down, and just do it one at a time. So now I'm picking up some more color. I'm just going to do an all over, just sort of light color, with it being a little bit darker at the top, and I'm working my way down. Now the watercolor paper is much thicker than regular cardstock, and so with the regular cardstock you'd get the layers of the paper start peeling off as you apply moisture to it, whereas this doesn't really do it that much. So here's where my darkest area is, and then I go back with my blender pen and I just blend it together and pull the color down around the edges where the dark shadows might be. And you just want to add just a tiny bit of color because it does spread out pretty dark. I just keep going back and forth until I get it right. Alright, so I'm going to do that on all of the petals. This is what it looks like when I'm done. Now, as I said before, you can't really take color out, so that's why I used a white colored pencil to go back and kind of color over some of the areas that are going to be the brightest where the light is hitting it. Alright, now I'm going to do this flower using Perfect Plum. And I just used a marker to put some on that sheet. And I'm going to do an all over light color, just like I would with a Copic marker. Then I'm going to add the marker on the inside directly to the paper, and I'm going to just blend. And then here I am going back with my white colored pencil. I used Old Olive on these leaves. And I put the shadow in the center and kind of on the bottom and blended it outward. And I did it a few times to make sure it's pretty dark in that middle area. Alright, then I'm going to cut them all out. Now I'm going to piece this together. Now I took my ATG gun, immediately put the adhesive on the back of that, and then immediately I regretted it because I realized that I wanted to do some other things before I placed it on that background. So here I'm trying to decide if I'm going to pencil it in and then marker, or pencil and marker, and I just kept going back and forth. But, but eventually I decided to just go ahead and use my marker. This is Old Olive, the same color I used on the leaves, and I'm going to take, now this is always artichoke, and I'm just going to create a shadow on these stems. I'm just using my fine tip. One side is a fine tip on the markers, and then I'm going back. This is my blender pen. And this is regular cardstock, so you can't really do a lot of blending or your paper's going to start to peel. So you don't get as much of a blending effect as you're getting with the flowers on the watercolor paper. Alright, it's sticking everywhere because I put this adhesive on it. Alright, so I'm getting some linen thread. I'm just gonna wrap around one time. And I'm gonna make a bow, and I'm gonna adhere it where the stems are. Alright, here I'm just putting on some foam adhesive, and that's how I applied those flowers. I just edited that out because it was kind of boring. And so I've got these stems, leaves that I cut out, and I'm just coloring those in so they look like they come right out of the stem of the flower. This is just Crystal Effects, a little drop for some glue. Use my Thank You Kindly stamp set. And my Stampin' jig to get it aligned just right. So because I put that Crystal Effects on there, I couldn't turn it over because it was still wet. So I just put the adhesive on the white card. And that's it. I hope you enjoy, and I appreciate you watching. I'll see you next week.